So today we're going to talk about is IP, or intellectual property. You guys probably heard about it more commonly called trademarks and patents. So it's a really sticky situation. It's really convoluted. It's entirely made up of gray areas. There's very few areas that are purely black and white. So to dive into this, there's a difference between patents and trademarks. We'll start off with, if you are a clothing brand, you don't need to worry about patents. You're not reinventing the t-shirt. You're not creating something new. You're creating what would be considered a trademark. So the difference between that, so like a kettlebell, like an object like this would be a patent, right? So, but also there's different types of patents. There's a design patent, which is the features and the face and how it looks, and there's a utility patent, which is how a thing functions. So utility patents are very difficult to get. I spent $5,000 trying to get a utility patent for these ergonomic facets on the kettlebell company that we had, and went nowhere with that. It cost me $5,000 to go nowhere. Intellectual property is one of the most expensive areas of law you could ever get into. Utility patent has to do with the function. Design patent is just the way that it looks and the features on it. There's more into that, but that's just the baseline that you need to know about that. So we're just going to talk about trademarks. Nice and simple, you would think. But it gets complicated because there's a design trademark and a plain text trademark. For instance, in this design here, we've got the words Industry Threadworks, and they're also in design, right? So if I have a design trademark, that means that I own the design and the features on it and the way that it looks. I might not necessarily own the words in the design. And that's why it's important. The strongest trademark that you can get is a plain text trademark, meaning I own the words Industry Threadworks, no matter what font, no matter what design, no matter the angle, the color, no matter what it is, I own the actual words Industry Threadworks. But it's important to note on a plain text trademark, I don't own Industry by itself, and I don't own Threadworks by itself. I only own that specific combination, Industry Threadworks. So anytime I make a design or a logo or whatever it is with this brand, I need to make sure I include both words on that product, whatever it is. Now we've got a bunch of different designs, as you guys will too if you have a clothing line, and you might think, well, do I need to trademark all my designs? Like, how does that work? You don't. You really only need to trademark your name in plain text and the design of your logo. And with that, there's a whole bunch of other things that go into that as well, but that's the basics of it. There's two different types of trademarks: design trademark and plain text trademark. The strongest mark you want to have, and the one that you want to try to get, is both of them. You want your name in plain text, and you want your design trademark as well. Another thing about trademarks, and we talk about this, it is the most expensive area of law you could get into. So you're going to spend quite a bit of money on a trademark, anywhere from $500 to $5,000, depending on the complexity and who you might have to fight to get that. Now, with digital real estate, meaning like the .coms and the names of anything that you can come up with, being reduced daily. There's new brands coming out every day. People are buying up. They're buying up the .coms. They're buying up all the digital real estate. So that means it's more likely now that you're going to start a brand and come into conflict with at least 1 to 5 other brands that might have started in similar areas, or maybe they're doing something like a service mark. They're in, maybe they have a fulfillment company and you're a dry cleaning business, or maybe they're a content creation company, videographer, and you're a clothing brand. So there's different classes of trademarks. So for apparel, it's class 25. So when you file the trademark, make sure it's in class 25. But on that, don't try to do it yourself. It's a total disaster. You can do it, you can try to do it, but if anybody is good at what they're doing and they want your trademark, there's a high probability they can come in and just take your trademark from you, which sounds weird, but trademarks are not invincible. It's not like you own it and as soon as you get it, you can not do anything with it and you own it forever. You have to defend them. And the way the USPTO, US Patent Trademark Office, looks at it is if you don't defend it, then you don't really care about it, so they're not going to enforce it. So you kind of have to go after and defend these, you have to defend your mark whether you want to or not. Like, we've had to send out a couple cease and desist letters for some of the trademarks that we have, and some of those guys are my friends, the guys that I know personally. They just didn't know that I had the trademark on it, and I don't want to be mean to these guys. I don't want to sue them, but at the same time, if I don't send a cease and desist, if I don't have a conversation, but I don't defend my mark, now it dilutes my mark, and the next person who I do want to defend it against is going to be like, well, they're going to have a good chance of coming against me, and it'll weaken my case, because the Patent and Trademark Office can be like, well, yeah, you don't want them using it, but this person had a similar case and you didn't go after them, so we're not going to protect it for you. So it's very important that you understand that you have to defend it. Getting a trademark is one thing. Defending it is entirely different. We've been in a few lawsuits about this before. Thankfully, we won them all because we're pretty smart at this shit. But it's very complex. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it. It's not a plug and play. It's not something you want to get into all on your own, because, and one of the things we look for is when we're researching a trademark, the best thing to do is go on, there's two platforms I would go on first. First one is trademarkia.com. That is a commercial site. It's not a government site, but it's way easy to navigate, and you just type in the trademark that you want, and it'll pull up a lot of information, whether it's dead, alive, canceled, abandoned, whatever it is, and that'll give you a good starting point of what to look for. The other one is uspto.gov, which is a government site, and like all government sites, it's a total pain in the ass to navigate. There's a test system that goes in, and there's ways that you can do it, but I don't recommend getting into that, because it's just a clusterfuck. Like we talked about, digital real estate is becoming scarcer and scarcer, and when you do come up with a clothing name or a name for your clothing brand, you're probably gonna have some kind of conflict with somebody. There's probably somebody, 5 years ago that started a company and they didn't really do anything with it, or maybe they started it and they're not really serious about it, or maybe they're a really big company, and then you gotta decide, what do you do? So, as in a story about this, when Mike Sowers and I were first starting Forge Clothing back in, I think, 2007, Forge wasn't the first name of the company. The first name of the company was Knox, K-N-O-X. And we had all designs made. We spent like $15,000 on inventory. We got all our stuff. We had our website. We had everything rolling. We're actually selling product. And because we were new to the game, and there was nobody to ask about this shit at the time, we didn't even think to look for any other brands of that name. So after we'd spent on this product, or this money on product, and after we'd actually sold some stuff, we noticed there was another brand called KNOXX, which was a little bit older and quite a bit bigger than us at the time. So Mike and I had to go back to the drawing board and look at each other and be like, well, what do we want to do with this? Like, we're eventually going to come into conflict with this other company because the name is, so similar. So do we want to get big and try to win in some kind of lawsuit with them? But we were going to lose that because they were in the market first. So they had precedence, whether we had a trademark or not. So we ended up going back and changing the name of the company, sold all our product with KNOX, changed the designs, and relaunched it with a new name, which was Forge Clothing. So Mikey came up with that, and he's, props on him, way better name than the first one. So that worked out really well, and thank God that happened, because that name is perfect for the brand. But that's an example of, if you do come across some kind of conflict, which is very likely these days, you got to decide what you want to do. There's several different ways to do that. If it's a big company, like I said in the beginning, the number one thing you don't want to do with IP is to get in a legal dispute with somebody who's bigger and has more money than you, because chances are you're going to lose. Even if you are going to win your case, they might just lock it up in court for 3 years and just wait for you to dry up and your business to die. So be very careful about that. If they're medium size, about the same size, you can do, depending on how deep the conflict is, you can do a kind of, I forget what the technical term for it is, but it's essentially like a coexist or a live and let live thing, where like, hey, I'm gonna stick to these products, I'm gonna stick to this version of this logo or words or whatever it is, and you're gonna stick to this area over here, and you guys have an agreement that like, hey, we're gonna draw this line in the sand, like I'm not gonna do hats and you're not gonna do t-shirts, right? So even though the same class, you guys can agree to coexist in there. It's sketchy, but it can be done if you're two like equally sized entities. The other one is if you're bigger than the other company and you just kind of want to be a dick, you can get somebody's trademark rescinded, which sounds like a dick move. But if somebody's squatting on a trademark that they got 5 years ago and they haven't done anything with it, then and you have a really good idea and you're confident and you want to go and push it and move it forward, you have options. We did that with one trademark. There was a guy that had the trademark for one thing that we wanted, and he had sat on it for 4 years, didn't do anything with it. And I reached out to the guy. It's like, look, man, like, I want to buy this from you. Like, it's a cool trademark. We're going to use it. I know you haven't been using it for anything. I don't want your work to go to waste. I want to pay you for what you did. So I'd like to buy this trademark from you. We got no response. So we just got his trademark rescinded. We put product in the market. We applied for the trademark. It came up as a conflict. We said, hey, this guy hasn't even used his trademark in 4 years. We're actually using it in commerce right now. And we got his trademark rescinded and assigned to us. So that's an example of you have to defend your work. You have to defend your intellectual property, because if you don't, somebody's gonna come along and take it. It's like taking territory in land. If you just go buy some land out somewhere and somebody can come along and plant a flag on it, and you go up and you're gonna have conflict at some point. Be like, hey, get the fuck off my land. And now you're in some kind of battle. That's exactly how the IP landscape works. And the problem with it is it's not black and white. Everything is shades of gray, and that's why you need a really good trademark attorney. There's a lot of attorneys that suck. So be very careful with who you choose. And so those of you guys who are very new to business, you might not know that you can't use just any attorney. Law is very specialized depending on which area of law you're going into. So you'll need probably a business lawyer for bigger business strategy type stuff. So you might need a contract attorney if you're dealing with contracts. You're definitely gonna need an IP attorney if you're dealing with any kind of trademarks. It's a very nuanced part of law. I love it because it blends the creative aspect of like the design and the function and the branding of it with the very mathematical and analytical strategy of how do we apply this artistic creative thinking in a landscape of strategy that's very structured. And the attorneys who are good at that are not cheap. So just be prepared to spend some money on your trademark. But it comes back to, that's why the main rule in IP is never get in a lawsuit with somebody more money than you. I think it's the third time I said that. Maybe.
That's perfect. Like, that's a big point.
Maybe cut one of those out, yeah. So another thing to consider about trademarks is once you file a trademark, you're going to get all these things in the mail about, oh, you need to file this internationally. It's going to be $800 or whatever. Unless you're an international brand like Nike or Adidas or something, you're not going to need to defend your trademark from somebody in Taiwan. You know what I mean? And by the time you get that big that somebody is trying to knock your shit off in Thailand, you're going to have money to figure out how to actually do a real international trademark. So once you establish a trademark, just everything else that comes in the mail, unless it's from the actual USPTO.gov, like an actual government entity, you don't need to worry about it. So say you have a business that's unrelated to apparel, but you also have apparel. So if you have, say, a company that's like a water company, right? And you have the trademark of your water company, and you also do t-shirts, it would make sense to spend the extra money to get the trademark on t-shirts as well, because you don't want, Aqua, whatever your water company name is, you don't want somebody else coming out with a clothing brand called Aqua, and now they're selling t-shirts that are completely different from yours, but the average consumer is going to think you guys are connected. So if you're branching out to any of these other different areas, it makes sense to put your trademark in the appropriate class.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Some of these things I'm like, I get so in the weeds on it, I forget that like...
Is there a place that people could go to like understand when you say class? Like to understand like, oh, you say like you don't know the class of that, but you know the class of apparel. Like
That's a good question. How do I find out the class of trademark? Question mark. LegalZoom pops up for that. LegalZoom is really good for like business structure. Highly recommend it for simple stuff like that. I would definitely recommend a specialized IP attorney for any kind of patents and trademarks though. But they're really good for just starting out with, you know, business formation, LLCs, S corps, things like that. Okay, USPTO.gov, classification design codes. Yeah, you can search on USPTO.gov. It's a little bit clunky though, but it should be able to just, if you search, you know, whatever your Apparel's class 25, whatever kettlebells are, you can search that and figure it out. In fact, I'll just do that right now. What class of trademark are kettlebells? Question mark. There's a kettlebell company that sells kettlebells, but they also have, they're in class 41, which is education, because they also have training manuals on how to actually use kettlebells. So they're going to need a trademark in that class, which is education, but probably also the product class that kettlebells will fall into, which we'll find out. Kegels and kettlebells. There's all kinds of weird shit on the internet, bro. Class 9 is another kettlebell company. It's got in Class 9, Scientific Nautical Surveying Photographic Cinematographic Optical Weighing Measuring Signaling Device for a kettlebell. I don't know, it must have some wacky shit going on there. But they've also got in Class 25, Class 28, which is games and playthings, gymnastics and sporting equipment, and Class 41, which is education. So you see, there's really, like, once you're starting a brand, you have to defend it in multiple areas. It's like building a castle. Like, you have to have multiple areas of defense because your enemies are going to come at you from all different angles. You can't just build a wall and be like, I'm going to defend this way, because enemies are just going to come around. So look at what you're building in the digital space, in the business space, as an actual physical representation, right? There's a lot of similarities to go with that. You have to build the foundation up strong so that you can build something tall. If you build something big on a weak foundation, it's just going to fall over and crumble eventually. So there's a lot of similarities with the business world and the actual physical world. Kind of like the real estate, you know, on the beachfront is very finite. That's why it's very expensive. The digital real estate, same thing. Like shoes.com, I think sold for $9 million, something like that. That's highly valuable real estate, digital real estate. So hopefully it helps you think about like the business atmosphere and the business landscape as if it's a physical landscape. And when you're building your business, build it like a fortress. Don't overbuild it. If you're only building like a prairie house, you don't need like a moat around it and a drawbridge and you know, Stonehenge type blocks of stone to build it. But if you do have big aspirations, if you want to build something big, you got to make sure you build it right from the ground up. Otherwise, you're just going to have major problems later. And we do see that quite a bit. A lot of them can be fixed, but if you don't know how to fix them, sometimes those problems can manifest and then they're too late, and then you're kind of fucked sometimes. What a lot of people don't realize about IP and trademarks is that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the trademarks that you file is just a way to back up what's actually being sold in commerce. So if you are the first to market, if you sell a hat on January 1st and then somebody files a trademark for that exact design on February 1st, you can actually get their trademark rescinded because you have first rights because you were the first one to sell it in commerce. And that's what it all comes down to, is who has first rights in commerce. That really defines everything. The trademarks and the patents are just a way to build off that. So the strongest case you could ever have is you're actually selling product, first to market with a specific product that has your design and clear logo. You have the plain text trademark on it, and you also have the design trademark for your logo. If you have those three things and you defend it, you're gonna have a really strong foundation to build a solid brand off of. It's gonna be really hard for anybody to attack that castle. But if you have one piece of it, like you have the plain text trademark but not a design trademark, or the design trademark and not the plain text trademark, or maybe you don't have any of that and you just have use in commerce, you're leaving a lot of ways open for people to come in and cause a lot of problems for your business. And that's why we always suggest doing things right, doing them from the start, and building up appropriately. So on that, it depends how big you want to go. If you're running a small to medium side It depends how big you want to go. If you're running a small to medium-sized business in one specific area, like just using kettlebell as an example, and you have t-shirts as well, you might not even need to file a trademark for t-shirts. You might not need to spend the money. You might not need to care. If you want to build a big company, then yeah, it makes sense to shore up all these things and build your walls up and your defenses and build something big. But if that's not your goal, if your goal is just do something personal and have fun and make money, and you don't want to build it, at scale, then you don't need to go through all that process. You don't need to spend the money on defensing everything. So it's very important that you know the groundwork and the rules so that you can kind of pick and choose which strategy you want to take, because you don't want to overbuild and spend a ton of money on infrastructure and support and defenses and all this stuff if really you're not building that type of business. If you are, you need it. If you're not, you might not need a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. So you got to be very self-aware with what your business is, what it isn't, how big you want to go with it, and how big you're comfortable scaling, because scale is not the right answer for everybody. Scaling a business is a lot of work. It's very expensive, all-consuming, and it's not the right choice for a lot of people. Some people just want to have a great business and have fun and work and enjoy life. And that's probably the smart move. We probably hated that part there. I know, right? So, to close this out, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an IP anything other than I'm just a business owner who's had pretty significant experience and a couple lawsuits with this over the last 15 years of operating in the IP landscape. So, take this sort of worth. I hope it's useful for you, but also make sure as you step into this, you talk with an actual IP attorney for yourself and decide what's right for you. Cool. Disclaimer.